Happy New Year. Happy New Year. This is the last one. Yeah. I was thinking about that last night. I was like, yeah, tomorrow.
Really?
Knock that out.
You have some champagne. Are you thinking about us?
That's right. I was thinking about all of you.
Get my wife back.
That's wine.
How you guys doing? I'm pretty excited. I got to use my dad joke last night with my kids when I put them to bed. See you next year. Yeah, it was sweet. I was very fired up on myself for that one.
Calvin Watkins, Dallas Morning News. How has Joe Milton progressed this year? I mean, we've seen him a little bit doing the games, but you don't see him in practice. How's he moved along?
Yeah, I think you can definitely see he's moved on to kind of the next iteration of understanding like how to be an NFL quarterback. And I think aside from the differences between college football and the NFL, I do think that there's kind of an extra layer of playing quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys that just in my experience and being with different teams, the way that things have been set up here and the way that Dak learned the game was the right way. But in some other offenses, I think it would be maybe considered a little bit old school with the amount of responsibility that, that Dak can clearly handle, that maybe isn't being asked to of other quarterbacks. So it's been good for Joe because, if he were in there all the time, would you ask him to do all those things? Probably not right away, but when he's learning it during the season like he was this year, he's having to learn the things that Dak does. So you can see him during walkthroughs and you can hear it during meetings that there's answers that come out now that like, bang, let's get to an ollie call there. And you're like, all right, Joe, he's it's things that were probably cloudy to him during training camp and during OTAs, I think are very clear to him now. So it's all part of the process. And he's certainly not a finished product, but I'm pleased with where I can tell he's gone mentally.
We've talked to him about his arm strength and maybe does he need a little bit of touch on some throws. He seemed a little defensive about that. So where do you stand on sometimes you have a little touch, take a little something off? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously haven't played quarterback since Pee Wee football, but I'm not a big proponent of telling the quarterback that you got to change the way that you throw or any of that stuff. I do think there's something to be said about a catchable ball. Just you haven't been around Phillip Rivers and some of those guys, but I do think that Joe has some of that. That thing comes out hot, but it's not the same temperature every time it comes out.
Well, so the Dallas Cowboys, 3-game stretch right now with Tyler Smith at left tackle. How's it going so far? The adjustment from guard to tackle.
Obviously he's an unbelievable talent, and I didn't really have any experience watching him play tackle in my time here, and so it was a pure evaluation for me. I think that he's done really well. I think the thing that we've got to decide when you get to the offseason is, number one, what's the best thing for the team? And so how do you put the best 5 guys out there? And then number two, is it going to be also the right thing for him and his career and with us? Because obviously, we feel like he's going to be a guy that's here. So I don't know the answers to that question. I think that in watching him right now, he's certainly an option out there. But I think you would want to get to the point, and we're not there yet because it's only a couple of games, but I think you would want to get to the point where you feel like he's playing just as good or better at tackle than he is at guard, because then you can really apply value to what he's doing.
Because some people evaluate, well, he doesn't move, and it's a different thing being inside and outside, and he's been 2 games. Now, obviously, if he's doing the whole offseason, it's going to be a different thing. But does it take away his superpower, the thing that he does best at guard, the strength and being in that box compared to being outside?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think the way that I've been kind of antiquating it is, the guy is so strong. I mean, he has like freakish strength, and when you're applying that to a defensive end in the run game, there's also something that's a little bit different there. Is his ability to move defensive ends is going to be different than his ability to move defensive tackles, and he can move defensive tackles. The other part of it is that tackles are in combination less than the interior guys are, and he is a guy who has a much higher likelihood of winning one-on-one in the run game than some of the other guys. And so there's part of it I think that you got to evaluate there is if you're not going to be in combination, you're going to be one-on-one with the DN in the run game, that guy's going to create movement. So, it'll all be part of the evaluation moving forward. I do think he's played a little better each game, and I expect him to play well this weekend against a really good front.
Clayton Todd Archer with ESPN. Jaden Blue might get an opportunity. The injuries of the guys ahead of him. What excites you about maybe seeing him play here in this last game?
Yeah, I think, with any of these guys, if you have the ability to kind of add some plays to the cut up that you're going to watch and evaluate in the offseason, I think that that's a positive thing for us and it's a positive thing for them because otherwise you're projecting. And so, if we can get him some plays, I don't know whether that's going to end up happening or not, but anybody that we're able to put plays, in that cut up for in the offseason, you feel like you have more of an idea of what you're dealing with moving forward. And I think that it gives you more of an educated opinion, as you're making decisions.
And then TJ Bass, could he be a full-time starter in your mind, 17-week starter with what he's done?
Yeah, I think talent-wise he can. I think that he's played some good football for us for sure. The big thing for TJ is just being in a position where he can be healthy for 17 games. That's been something that he struggled a little bit with. But I think in regards to just going out and playing on the field, that's one of the reasons that we made the move that we made a couple of weeks ago. Is we have a lot of confidence that TJ can play good football for us.
Nick Harris, Football Star Telegram. You guys haven't had a second-half touchdown since the Detroit game. What do you attribute that to, and what have been the conversations this week in trying to address that?
I think, I think all of those games are different. I actually felt like we played pretty well in the second half last week, where I didn't feel the same way the week before. So maybe the Chargers game, it was just that we didn't execute the way that we needed to execute and didn't put ourselves in position to win there in the second half. I think, the Washington game, you're going to make a few decisions that are based on playing with a lead. And you're going to kick field goals when maybe you would have gone for it, where in the game before we're playing from behind, it's like, gosh, we got to get a touchdown here. And so obviously that attributes to not being able to score in the second half, where last week, had we gone for some of those, maybe we would have gotten a touchdown. I do think they're just all completely different situations.
And then, super broad question, but what are two conversations you're really looking forward to having this offseason and helping improve the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I think, for me, the biggest learning lesson this season is I've never been on an offense that's had two receivers like we have, and so I really want to dive into that of how can we make it even more difficult for defenses and what formations are we in that are going to be, because a lot of times when we're putting together the first and second down plan, it's just I want to run this out of this formation because it breaks tendency, or I want to run this out of this formation because I think we're going to get this coverage adjustment or this alignment in the front. But I really want to take a deep dive on like where can we put these guys in the run game that put the most stress on the defense. And I think that we've figured some of those things out as we've gone, but that's something I'm really interested in.
Patrick.
Hey, Clayton. Patrick Walker, DallasCowboys.com. You said you figured some of those things out. When this next game is over and you're looking at the full body of work from you guys' offense, what do you feel is the biggest positive takeaway that you guys can build on going forward? And what do you feel is the single biggest inconsistency that you guys need to improve upon to hit that next level?
I think if you look at the statistics, one of the things that stands out is, we got to score touchdowns more in the red zone. And just having looked at those, the self-scout on that, just so much of it was self-inflicted wounds with penalties down inside the 10 and things like that. And so some of those things aren't super easy to solve. But that's going to be an area that we're going to obviously look at hard in the offseason. Just from watching the games without necessarily looking at stats, we've got to protect the quarterback a little bit better. not necessarily in terms of sack numbers or anything like that. And I think that our guys have been solid one-on-one in protection, just from a complete offensive standpoint as we're moving forward into this point in Dak's career. That's our guy, and we got to make sure that we keep him upright. And some of that is, him being an elite competitor, and we got to tell him he got to give up on a play sometimes, and sometimes we just got to do a better job of winning. Sometimes we got to have a better answer for the coverages that we're seeing. I mean, there's a variety of different reasons, but that's one thing that's been on my mind for sure.
And also yesterday, it looks like TJ Bass is dealing with a little bit of a knee issue. Can you just talk about, because obviously if Bass is down, then Brock Hoffman goes up. Just talk about Brock Hoffman's versatility to be able to move between those three interior spots for you.
Yeah, I mean, Brock is just been really great to have for us in a bunch of different ways. Aside from just the versatility, his mentality, and the way that he attacks practice, and the way that he goes, and even when he's on scout team, you can feel him and you know that he's there, and he supplies a certain mentality within the group. And then, just having a guy that is, you know exactly what you're going to get when Brock goes out there, and so that's an easy thing to kind of game plan for and set expectations for when you know what you're getting.
Tommy Arsh, DallasCowboys.com. We've asked you a lot about Tyler Booker this year. Now that you've got more or less a full season of work with him under your belt, what's something that surprised you or stood out to you the most about him and his style of play?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that there was a whole bunch that I had very high expectations for him, and I think that he has lived up to most of those. I would say that he's probably more productive with his hands in pass protection than I was anticipating him being. That's a thing that's really very difficult for young players to get their hands inside, especially when they've got pretty long arms and they're strong and they've been able to kind of manhandle people in college. Sometimes they do that a bunch in the NFL, and he gets his hands inside and he's pretty productive and accurate with them.
And then your first year as an offensive coordinator in this league, how would you kind of look at yourself? I know you got one game left, but just overall, how you feel like this year has gone for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a list of things in my office that I know that I got to get better at this, got to get better at this, got to get better at this. I feel like I've learned a ton. It's funny, I just had this conversation with my dad. I feel like I've learned a ton. I feel like compared to where I was like week one, I feel like I've made massive steps, and then yet you look back at like, all right, what do I need to do better next year? That list is pretty long too. So it's certainly a growing process. I've got several different areas that I've targeted that I want to improve at this offseason, and yet like some of it you just have to do the job to know. And so there's a lot of things that I feel like I've learned this season that I wouldn't have learned if I was still coaching the O-line in Arizona, for example. So it's education by fire, but it's been good. I feel way more comfortable and still totally uncomfortable at the same time.
What are some of those things that you put down on that list?
I want my process during the week to kind of run itself. Because there's times like right when we go out to practice, I want to check the script one more time. Like that shouldn't probably be something that's in the back of my mind. I should make sure that that's set up, in a way that where I'm not worried about it. I know that's going to get taken care of. I want to feel much more natural in the pass game. That was something that took me really until my second year coaching tight ends in Indianapolis to feel that way, just because you get so locked in to what you're doing. I want that to be something that's easier and more natural for me.
Garrett Podell, CBS Sports. Clayton, a lot of excitement for both Jaden Blue and Phil Moff after the draft this past year. How would you say each one has progressed, and could you kind of just outline both their seasons?
Yeah, I'd say it's hard to know until they're like in there, because you find out so much more when guys are in games, right? But I'd say with Jaden in particular, it was kind of up and down because he made a couple of splash plays, and then there were some plays that weren't quite as good. With Phil, it was really just an evaluation of what you're seeing at practice, and then him kind of, even in training camp, he was coming back from a shoulder. So TBA on both of them. I think that the organization, or at least I, still have very high hopes for both of those guys. I have no reason not to. But you just, you get out in a real NFL game, there's no preseason, there's no training camp, there's nothing that can make up for those reps, the experience and takeaways that those guys get from them. So that I'll be very excited when that happens, and that there's some plays to sit and evaluate with those guys.
And with Javonte Williams, he's going to be a free agent this offseason. Kind of what have you seen from him? He was a $3 million guy this year, and kind of what are your hopes for him and potentially getting him back next year?
Yeah, I think he's obviously earned every bit of his paycheck. Total bell cow, good in pass protection, really good in the run game, awesome teammate, which is something that's important to me, and I know it's important to Shadi and what he's trying to build here. He's really the whole package. He was very consistent for us all the way through the year, and works well with Dak back there. He fit like a glove here. He's been awesome.
And we'll finish with Christy.
Christy Scales, 105.3 The Fan, Cowboys Radio. Question about this weekend, actually. Their change at defensive coordinator. Asked Shadi about it yesterday, and he said Shane was multiple and exotic, and Charlie simplified things and kind of tightened up the volume. What does that mean for you this week? And I'm specifically asking about Brian Burns, because I don't know if that suits more for him. And how do you stop that guy? Because nobody's done it this year.
Well, I mean, I wish they'd drop him more, into pass coverage. If they're listening, that would be a request that I would have, is just don't let him rush. But he's a animal. He's big, he's athletic, he's explosive. Plays with really good length. He plays with I don't know. I didn't really have a good evaluation on him before playing against him this year, but his motor and intensity, you just gotta have an all points broadcast on him. You gotta know where he's at every single snap, because the things that they do with him in sub defense, things that they do with him in base defense, is just constant mismatches. So you got to be really careful about where he's at.
Thanks, Coach.
Yep. Thank you guys.